The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with laughter. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the center podium, his blue skin gleaming under the bright lights. He held a datapad in his four-fingered hand and smiled with sharp teeth. "And now, honored delegates, we come to the most amusing part of our annual report," Kethvar said. His voice carried across the massive chamber. "The list of primitive species that still think they matter." More laughter filled the air. Representatives from dozens of alien races sat in floating chairs, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had tentacles, others had scales, and a few glowed with inner light. But they all shared the same expression of smug satisfaction. "At the top of our list we have the humans of Earth," Kethvar continued. The laughter grew louder. "They still send us requests for membership every year. Can you believe it? A species that gave up their colonies and ran home to hide once, to rejoin civilized society." Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the Earthship Defiant. The vessel was small compared to the massive alien warships that patrolled the galaxy, but it was all Earth had left after the Great Reconciliation 1,000 years ago. Jake was a tall man with brown hair and tired eyes. He had been listening to the council broadcast, and his jaw was tight with anger. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Foster, his communications officer, "should we turn off the broadcast?" "No," Jake replied. "Let them talk. Let them remember how funny they think we are." On the Lunar Research Station, Dr. Lisa Wright looked up from her work. She was a small woman, with red hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her laboratory was filled with strange devices and half-finished experiments. She had been working on something for months, something the council would not find funny at all. "They think we gave up," she whispered to herself. "They have no idea what we've been doing all this time." Back on Earth, Admiral Kate Rivers stood in the command center of the Defense Force. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. The walls around her showed displays of Earth's small fleet. Only 12 ships remained, active, a tiny fraction of what humanity once commanded. "Admiral," said her aide, Colonel Ben Parker, "the Council has rejected our membership request again." "Of course they did," Kate replied. She turned to look at a star map on the wall. It showed the galaxy divided among the alien powers. Red marked Zephyrian space. Green showed the Vorthan Collective. Blue indicated the Hegemony Alliance. A tiny yellow dot marked Earth and its few remaining colonies. "Ma'am, there's something else," Ben said. "We're getting a distress signal from the edge of known space. It's faint, but it looks like a ship in trouble." Kate studied the display. The signal came from a region of space that no one claimed. It was dangerous there, full of old war machines and dead planets. Most species avoided it completely. "Have any of the major powers responded?" she asked. "No, ma'am. The Zephyrians say it's not their problem. The Vorthans think it's a trap. The hegemony won't even answer their communications." Kate nodded slowly. This was typical. The great powers of the galaxy only helped when it served their interests. A single ship in distress meant nothing to them. "Contact Captain Morrison," she ordered. "Tell him to investigate." Jake received his orders 3 hours later. The Defiant was the only human ship in the area, and it would take 2 days to reach the signal's location. He gathered his crew of 30 people in the small briefing room. "We have a rescue mission," he announced. "Someone is in trouble out there, and we're the only ones who can help." "Sir," said Chief Engineer Tony Lopez, "that area is full of old war machines. Some of them are still active. It could be dangerous." "Since when has that stopped us?" Jake asked with a slight smile. "We're human. Dangerous is what we do best." The crew laughed. They knew their captain was right. Humans had always been willing to take risks that other species avoided. It was part of what made them different. 2 days later, the Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the distress signal. What they found made everyone on the bridge gasp in shock. A massive, alien structure floated in space bigger than a city. It was covered in weapons and armor plating that looked ancient but still functional. "Captain," said Lieutenant Foster, "I'm reading life signs on a small ship near that thing. But the structure is powering up weapons. It's going to fire on them." In 60 seconds, Jake didn't hesitate. All power to engines. Get us between that ship and the weapons platform. Sir, our shields won't stop those weapons, warned his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sam Davis. They don't have to stop them, Jake replied. They just have to confuse them long enough for us to act. The Defiant raced toward the massive structure. Jake had studied the old war records, the files that other species thought were lost forever. He knew what this thing was. It was a guardian platform, built by a dead race to protect their territory. It would attack anything that came too close. But Jake also knew its weakness. The Guardians had been programmed to recognize certain behavior patterns. They would not fire on ships that acted like traitors or diplomats. The trick was knowing them be right signals to send. Amy, transmit the old merchant codes on frequency 7, he ordered. Sam, cut all weapon power and lower shields, make us look harmless. The crew trusted their captain even when his orders seemed crazy. The codes went out, and the Guardian platform paused. Its weapons stayed active, but they did not fire. Tiaken. Small alien ship escaped while the Guardian was confused, but the platform was learning. It realized the codes were false, and its weapons turned toward the Defiant. Jake smiled grimly. Now came the hard part. Full power to engines. Evasive pattern. Delta 7, take us right at that thing. The Defiant shot forward like a bullet. The Guardian's weapons fired, but the little Earthship was too fast and too unpredictable. Jake used every trick he had learned from 1,000 years of human military history. He flew like pirates once flew in Earth's oceans, using speed and cunning instead of raw power. The Guardian platform tried to track the small ship, but its ancient computers could not predict human tactics. Jake brought his ship close to the structure and fired a single missile at a weak point he had identified from the old records. The explosion was small, but it hit the right spot. The Guardian platform shut down, its threat ended. Later, as the rescued alien ship thanked them and departed, Jake sat in his quarters writing his report. The galaxy would hear about this eventually. They would probably call it luck or say the Guardian was already damaged. But Jake knew better. Earth remembered how to fight. They had never forgotten. They had just been waiting for the right time to remind everyone else. The 1,000-year sleep was ending and humanity was beginning to wake up. 6 months had passed since Captain Jake Morrison disabled the Guardian platform. The story had spread across the galaxy, but most alien species dismissed it as luck. They said humans had simply stumbled onto an old weakness in ancient technology. The Galactic Council did not even mention it in their official reports. But some species remembered the old days. They remembered when humans had been different, when Earth's ships had ruled the spaceways with iron discipline and clever tactics. These species watched the news with growing interest. Commander Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of the Earthship horizon. He was a young man with black hair and intense green eyes. His ship was leading humanity's first deep space exploration mission in over 2 centuries. They had traveled beyond the edge of known space looking for new worlds and new resources. What they found instead was horror. "Commander," said his science officer, Dr. Maya Johnson, "you need to see this." Maya was a tall woman with blonde hair and a sharp mind. She had been studying the readings from the planet below them. What she saw made her stomach turn. The world had once been home to millions of people from the Kalari species. The Kalari looked like humans but with silver skin and large black eyes. They were peaceful traders who sold beautiful artwork across the galaxy. Now their cities were in ruins. Slave ships from the Vorthon Collective sat in orbit, loading the survivors into cargo holds like animals. The Vorthons were a brutal race that looked like giant insects with thick armor and cruel eyes. They had been expanding their territory, for years taking worlds and enslaving their people. "How many Kalari are left?" Ryan asked. "Maybe 50,000, Maya replied, "out of a population of 8 million. Ryan felt sick. The Vorthons had turned the entire world into a slave market. The other galactic powers knew about it but did nothing. The Kalari had no military, no way to fight back. They were helpless. "Sir," said his communications officer, "we're getting a message from the planet. It's on an old frequency, one that only humans use." The message was weak and full of static, but Ryan could understand it. An old Kalari leader was speaking in broken English, the language he had learned when humans still traded in this part of space. Please, if any humans hear this, we remember the old alliance. You promised to protect the weak. We call on that promise now. Ryan closed his eyes. The old alliance had been broken when Earth withdrew from galactic politics, but the promise had been real. Humans had once stood between bullies and their victims. It was part of what made them human. Set course for Earth, he ordered. Maximum speed. 3 days later, Ryan stood in Admiral Kate Rivers' office on Earth. The older woman listened to his report with a stone face. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. The Vorthons have 12 battleships in that system, she finally said. We have 4 ships that can fight them. The math doesn't look good. Admiral, we can't just let this happen, Ryan argued. The Kalari trusted us. They still trust us, even after all these years. Kate looked out her window at the blue sky of Earth. Somewhere out there, people were suffering while the galaxy did nothing. It was the same old story repeated across 1,000 worlds. You're right, she said at last. Send word to Captain Morrison and Captain Nina Brooks. Tell them to prepare for combat operations. Captain Nina Brooks commanded the Vengeance, Earth's newest and most powerful warship. She was a short woman with brown hair and a reputation for aggressive tactics. When she received her orders, she smiled grimly. Finally, she said to her crew, time to remind the galaxy what humans can do. The Earth battle group arrived at the Kalari homeworld 5 days later. 4 human ships faced 12 Vorthon vessels. The aliens laughed when they saw the small human fleet. They sent a message telling the humans to leave or be destroyed. Jake Morrison, now promoted to Commodore and commanding the battle group, sent back a simple reply. No. The battle began immediately. The Vorthon ships were larger and had more weapons, but they fought like bullies who had never faced real opposition. They charged straight ahead, expecting their enemies to run. The humans did not run. Instead, they used tactics that had been forgotten for 1,000 years. They split their formation and attacked from multiple angles. They used the planet's gravity to slingshot around and hit the Vorthons where they didn't expect it. Nina Brooks led the Vengeance in a daring attack on the Vorthon flagship. Her ship was smaller and faster, and she used that speed to devastating effect. She fired at the enemy's weapons and engines, crippling them instead of trying to destroy them all at once. The Vorthons had never seen tactics like these. Their commanders were confused and angry. They tried to coordinate their attacks, but the humans were always one step ahead. Jake Morrison flew the Defiant like a fighter pilot, not like the captain of a warship. He dove between enemy vessels, using their own size against them. When 2 Vorthon ships tried to catch him, he led them into each other's line of fire. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, 8 Vorthon ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 4 fled in panic, their commanders screaming threats and promises of revenge. The humans had lost no ships, though all 4 vessels were damaged. On the planet below, the surviving Kalari wept with joy as human Marines landed to free the slaves. Dr. Maya Johnson worked with the medical teams, treating the wounded and helping families reunite. News of the battle spread quickly across the galaxy. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Ambassador Kethvar was no longer laughing. This is an unprovoked attack on Vorthon territory, he declared. The humans must be punished for their aggression. But other voices spoke up. The representative of the Kalari, speaking from his ruined homeworld, told the story of the rescue. Representatives from smaller species began to remember old friendships with humanity. Perhaps, said the ambassador from the Centauri Alliance, it is time to reconsider Earth's application for membership. Back on Earth, Admiral Kate Rivers read the reports from the battle. Her small fleet had done the impossible. They had defeated a superior enemy through skill and determination. But she knew this was just the beginning. The Vorthons would want revenge. Other species would start to worry about human power. The galaxy was about to remember why they had once feared the small, blue planet and its stubborn people. In her quarters, Dr. Lisa Wright smiled as she read the battle reports. Her secret project was almost finished. Soon, Earth would have weapons that would make even the great powers take notice. The sleeping giant was stirring, and the galaxy was starting to pay attention. 3 days after the battle, the first alien, diplomatic ship in centuries requested permission to dock at Earth Station. The Altarians, a peaceful species of traders, wanted to discuss a mutual defense agreement. They remembered the old days when human protection had meant something. Admiral Rivers approved the meeting. It was time for Earth to start making new friends and reminding old ones why humanity had once been respected across the stars. The 1,000-year isolation was ending, and humanity was ready to take its place in the galaxy once again. The war came suddenly, as wars often do. It started with an ultimatum delivered to Earth by a joint fleet of 5 major alien powers: the Zephyrian Empire, the Vorthan Collective, the Hegemony Alliance, the Crystalline Federation, and the Void. Seekers had formed what they called the Galactic Security Coalition. Their message was simple: Earth must disband its military and return to isolation, or face the consequences. Admiral Kate Rivers read the ultimatum in her office while reports flooded in from across human space. Alien fleets were moving toward Earth's borders. The coalition had assembled over 300 warships, the largest military force the galaxy had seen in centuries. "They're scared," she said to General Alex Stone, Earth's top military strategist. Alex was a big man with gray hair and scars from his younger days as a Marine. He had been studying the enemy fleet movements on his datapad. "They should be," he replied grimly. "But they still have us outnumbered 10-1. Maybe more." Kate smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Numbers aren't everything, Alex. You taught me that yourself." The first attack came 3 days later. A Zephyrian battle group struck the outer colony of New Boston. The colonists had less than an hour to evacuate before alien ships began bombarding the planet from orbit. But something strange happened. As the Zephyrian ships fired on the empty cities below, hidden defense platforms rose from the planet's surface. They had been buried there for decades, waiting for this moment. The platforms opened fire with weapons that cut through alien shields like paper. Half the Zephyrian fleet was destroyed before they could retreat. The survivors fled in panic, unable to understand how a defenseless colony had such powerful weapons. Similar scenes played out across a dozen worlds. The aliens had expected to find weak colonies protected by a few old ships. Instead, they found defense networks that had been hidden for years, and weapons that were far more advanced than anyone had expected. On Earth, massive shipyards that had been disguised as civilian facilities suddenly revealed their true purpose. Factory ships that had been listed as cargo haulers opened up to show they were actually mobile weapons platforms. The planet's small defense fleet grew from 12 ships to over 100 in the space of a week. Captain Nina Brooks stood on the bridge of the new battleship Thunder. It was twice the size of any previous Earth ship and packed with weapons that Dr. Lisa Wright had been developing in secret. Nina was no longer just a captain. She had been promoted to admiral and given command of Earth's first battle fleet. "Admiral," said her communications officer, "we're getting reports from across the line. The enemy is pulling back to regroup." Nina nodded. The first phase of General Stone's plan was working perfectly. The aliens had expected a quick victory against a weak opponent. Instead, they had run into a brick wall of advanced technology and carefully prepared defenses. But Nina knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when the aliens stopped underestimating humanity and started fighting seriously. That test came at Wolf 359, a system on the edge of human space. The coalition had assembled their largest fleet there, over 100 ships, commanded by Admiral Vorthak of the Vorthan Collective. Vorthak was a veteran of dozens of battles, a cruel leader who had never lost a major engagement. The human force that met him was much smaller. Commander Ryan Carter led 30 ships, including several of the new battleships. But Ryan had studied under Jake Morrison, and he had learned the value of speed and clever tactics over raw firepower. The Battle of Wolf 359 lasted 18 hours. Ryan's ships darted between the massive alien vessels like fighters, never staying in one place long enough to be cornered. They used the system's asteroid belt as cover, hiding behind rocks and striking without warning. The aliens tried to use their superior numbers to surround the humans, but Ryan was always one step ahead. When they moved to cut off his escape route, he was already attacking from a different direction. When they concentrated their fire on his position, his ships had already moved somewhere else. Dr. Sam Collins watched the battle from his engineering station aboard the Lightning. Sam was a thin man with messy brown hair and oil-stained hands. He had designed the new faster-than-light drives that gave human ships their incredible mobility. "The enemy is getting frustrated," he reported to Ryan. "They're breaking formation to chase individual ships." That was exactly what Ryan had been waiting for. "All ships, execute Thunder Run. Target their command vessel." The Thunder Run was a tactic that only humans would attempt. All 30 ships charged directly at the enemy flagship, ignoring the dozens of weapons firing at them. Most species would have called it suicide, but the humans had calculated every angle. They knew exactly how fast they needed to move and which direction to dodge. Half of them were decoys, drawing fire away from the real attack ships. The other half concentrated all their weapons on a single target. Admiral Vorthak's flagship exploded in a ball of fire. Without their commander, the coalition fleet fell apart. Ships fled in all directions, their captains more concerned with saving their own lives than completing the mission. Ryan's victory at Wolf 359 sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The humans had not just won, they had done it with style, using tactics that no one had seen before. But the real surprise came when human forces began their counterattack. General Stone had named it Operation Homecoming, the reconquest of all the worlds humanity had lost during their 1,000 years of isolation. The first target was the colony of New Geneva, which had been occupied by the Crystalline Federation for 3 centuries. The crystallines were silicon-based life forms that looked like living diamonds. They were beautiful, but cold, caring nothing for the human civilians who lived under their rule. Admiral Jake Morrison led the attack with a fleet of 60 ships, but when he arrived at New Geneva, he found something unexpected. The human colonists who had supposedly been living as subjects of the Crystalline Federation were actually armed and organized. "Admiral," came a transmission from the planet. "This is Colonel Sarah Mitchell, commander of the New Geneva Resistance. We've been waiting for you." Jake smiled. The colonies had never truly been conquered. They had been playing the long game, pretending to submit while secretly preparing for this day. As his fleet engaged the Crystalline Defense Force in space, human rebels on the planet struck at enemy bases and communication centers. The Crystallines found themselves fighting a two-front war against enemies who knew every inch of the battlefield. The liberation of New Geneva took only 6 hours. Similar operations freed a dozen other worlds in the following weeks. Each victory revealed the same truth. Humanity had never really left these places. They had just been waiting for the right moment to come home. The aliens were beginning to panic. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions every day, trying to understand how their easy target had become such a dangerous enemy. "The humans are not fighting like any species we know," reported Admiral Kethvar. His blue skin had turned pale with worry. "They adapt to every situation. They turn our strengths into weaknesses. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Wright was putting the finishing touches on her greatest creation. It was called the Damocles Protocol, a network of defensive satellites that would make Earth itself impossible to attack. Each satellite was small and hard to detect, but together they formed a shield that could stop any invasion. Admiral Kate Rivers watched the final satellite launch from her command center. Earth was now the most heavily defended world in the galaxy. Any enemy fleet that tried to attack would be destroyed before it could get within weapons range. "The first phase is complete," she told her staff. "Now we move to Phase 2. Phase 2 was about showing the galaxy that humans were not just good at defense. They were also very good at taking the fight to their enemies. Captain Tony Martinez had been promoted to Admiral and given command of the largest human fleet ever assembled. 200 ships, including the massive new dreadnought Retribution. His mission was simple: strike at the heart of coalition territory and force them to surrender. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that it had forgotten over the past 1,000 years. Humans were dangerous not just because they were good at fighting. They were dangerous because they never gave up, never stopped adapting, and never forgot their friends. The sleeping giant was fully awake now, and it was very, very angry. Admiral Tony Martinez stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, watching as the largest human fleet in history prepared for battle. 200 ships spread out in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. This was the moment humanity had been building toward for months of war. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Kelly Adams. She was a young woman with short red hair and steady hands that never shook, even in the heat of battle. Tony nodded slowly. He was a tall man with dark skin and eyes that had seen too much war. But today, those eyes burned with determination. Operation Homecoming had reached its final phase, the liberation of Terra Nova, humanity's first and most important colony world. Terra Nova had been taken by the Hegemony Alliance 400 years ago. It was now the capital of their entire eastern sector, home to billions of aliens who had built their cities on top of human ruins. The Hegemony had thought it would be impossible for humans to take back such a heavily defended world. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. "Begin the approach," Tony ordered. "All ships, maintain formation Delta 7. Remember, we're not just fighting for Terra Nova. We're fighting for every human who ever called that world home." The Hegemony fleet that met them was massive. Over 300 ships commanded by Admiral Zerath, a creature that looked like a giant spider made of metal and flesh. Zerath had never lost a major battle, and he was confident that his superior numbers would crush the human attack. But Admiral Martinez had been studying Hegemony tactics for months. He knew their weaknesses, their preferred formations, their standard responses to different threats. And he had something they had never faced before: Dr. Ellen Hayes' new weapons. Dr. Hayes stood in the weapons control room of the Retribution, her fingers dancing over control panels covered in lights and switches. She was a small woman with gray hair and glasses, but her mind contained the most destructive knowledge in human space. "Quantum torpedoes armed and ready," she reported. "Plasma cannons charged to full power. The new shields are holding at maximum strength." The quantum torpedoes were Dr. Hayes' masterpiece. They could pass through normal shields like they weren't there and explode inside enemy ships. No other species had ever developed anything like them, because no other species thought the way humans did. The battle began as Admiral Zerath's ships charged forward in their traditional formation. They expected the humans to retreat or try to match their formation with a larger force. Instead, the human fleet suddenly split into 5 separate groups and attacked from all directions at once. "What are they doing?" Zerath demanded from his command ship. His mechanical voice was filled with confusion and growing anger. This makes no tactical sense, but it made perfect sense to a human commander. Each group had a specific target and mission. While 3 groups kept the main Hegemony fleet busy, the other 2 struck at supply ships and command vessels. It was like a pack of wolves hunting a herd of animals. They went for the weak points and separated their prey. Captain Nina Brooks led one of the attack groups in her battleship Thunder. Her ships moved like dancers, weaving between enemy vessels and striking at exactly the right moments. She had learned to fight from Jake Morrison, and she fought with the same combination of courage and cunning that had made him legendary. "Target their communications array," she ordered her weapons officer. "Cut off their ability to coordinate." The Thunder dove toward a massive Hegemony command ship, dodging weapon fire with moves that seemed impossible for such a large vessel. Nina's crew worked like a machine, each person knowing exactly what to do without being told. Dr. Hayes' quantum torpedoes struck the enemy ship's shields and passed right through them. The explosions inside the vessel crippled its communication systems and left it blind and deaf to the battle around it. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human ships used their superior mobility and advanced weapons to devastating effect. The Hegemony forces had more ships, but they couldn't coordinate their attacks. Each vessel was fighting alone against enemies who moved and struck as one. Commander Ryan Carter led the attack on the orbital defense platforms around Terra Nova itself. His ships had to navigate through a maze of automated weapons and mine fields that had been designed to stop any invasion. But Ryan had something the platforms weren't designed for: intelligence from within. Human resistance fighters on Terra Nova had been mapping the defenses for years, sending coded messages to Earth through hidden communication networks. They knew exactly where the weak points were. "Follow my lead," Ryan told his squadron. "Stay close and trust the navigation data." His ships threaded through the defenses like needles through cloth. They struck at power generators and control centers, using precise attacks instead of brute force. Within an hour, the orbital defenses were offline, and human marines were landing on the planet's surface. On Terra Nova, Colonel Sarah Mitchell led the planetary resistance out of hiding. She was a tough woman with scars on her face and fire in her eyes. For 20 years, she had been waiting for this moment. "All units, this is Liberation Command," she broadcast to resistance cells across the planet. "The fleet has arrived. Execute Operation Sunrise." Across Terra Nova, human fighters emerged from secret bases and hidden bunkers. They struck at hegemony installations with weapons they had been hiding for decades. Government buildings exploded. Communication towers fell, and alien commanders found themselves cut off from their forces. The hegemony had never faced anything like this. They were used to fighting conventional wars against organized armies. They didn't know how to handle an entire planet full of people who wanted them gone. In space, Admiral Martinez watched as the enemy fleet began to break apart. Some ships were trying to retreat, others were still fighting, and a few were attempting to bombard Terra Nova from orbit to stop the rebellion. "All ships, protect the planet," he ordered. "Nothing gets through." The human fleet formed a protective shell around Terra Nova, intercepting any ship that tried to attack the surface. Dr. Hayes's weapons made short work of the bombardment ships, their quantum torpedoes passing through shields to detonate inside enemy hulls. Admiral Zerath realized his position was hopeless. His fleet was scattered, his communications were jammed, and the planet he was supposed to protect was in full revolt. For the first time in his long military career, he faced the possibility of total defeat. "All ships retreat to the secondary line," he ordered. But it was too late. His scattered forces couldn't regroup fast enough to escape the human pursuit. The Battle of Terra Nova lasted 8 hours. When it was over, the hegemony fleet had lost over 200 ships. The human fleet had lost only 12, and most of those were damaged rather than destroyed. But the real victory was on the planet's surface. After 400 years of alien rule, Terra Nova was free. Human colonists emerged from hidden settlements to reclaim their ancestral home. The resistance fighters who had kept the dream alive were finally able to see it come true. The news of Terra Nova's liberation spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Galactic Council met in emergency session, but they could no longer ignore what was happening. Humanity had not just won a battle, they had proven they could defeat any opponent no matter how large or powerful. Ambassador Kethvar stood before the council, his blue skin pale with fear. "The humans are not the species we remember," he said. "They have become something new, something dangerous." Other delegates nodded in agreement. The humans had shown capabilities that no one had expected. Their weapons were more advanced, their tactics were more sophisticated, and their determination was absolute. "Perhaps," suggested the representative from the Altarian Trade Union, "it is time to discuss peace terms." The word peace sent a shiver through the council chambers. For months they had been confident that their combined forces could crush the human rebellion. Now they were talking about surrender. On Earth, Admiral Kate Rivers received reports from across human space. Every day brought news of new victories, new worlds liberated, new allies joining the human cause. The 1,000-year isolation was truly over, but Kate knew the war was not finished yet. The aliens still controlled vast territories and had billions of ships scattered across their empires. They would not give up easily, even in the face of defeat. "Send a message to Admiral Martinez," she ordered. "Tell him to prepare for the final phase. It's time to take this fight to the enemy's homeworlds." The galaxy was about to learn the final lesson about humanity. They were not just good at fighting wars. They were also very good at ending them on their own terms. The age of alien dominance was coming to an end and a new era was about to begin. 6 months after the liberation of Terra Nova, Admiral Jake Morrison sat in what had once been the Galactic Council's most exclusive meeting room. The chamber was still magnificent, with its floating platforms and holographic displays, but the faces around the table were very different from before. Where once only alien delegates had sat, now humans occupied half the seats. Admiral Kate Rivers sat at the head of the table as the newly elected Secretary General of Galactic Defense. Dr. Lisa Wright represented the Science Council. General Alex Stone spoke for military affairs. The war was over, but the work of building peace had just begun. The surrender documents have been signed by all 5 coalition powers, Kate announced to the assembly. The Zephyrian Empire, the Vorthan Collective, the Hegemony Alliance, the Crystalline Federation, and the Void Seekers have all agreed to the terms of the Terran Peace Accord. The terms had been harsh but fair. The coalition powers would release all conquered worlds and return them to their original inhabitants. They would pay reparations for the damage caused during the war. Most importantly, they would accept human oversight of their military forces to prevent future aggression. Ambassador Kethvar sat in his assigned seat, his once proud bearing now reduced to quiet resignation. The Zephyrian Empire that had dominated galactic politics for centuries was now a junior partner in the new order. His blue skin seemed to have lost its shine, and his sharp teeth no longer showed in confident smiles. "The humans have won," he said quietly to the delegate sitting next to him. "Not just the war, but everything. They control the galaxy now." But if Kethvar expected the humans to rule like conquerors, he was wrong. The Terran Peace Accord was not about human dominance. It was about making sure no single species could dominate anyone else ever again. Admiral Tony Martinez stood at the podium to address the assembly. His fleet had been the one to force the final surrender, striking at the coalition's homeworlds with precision attacks that avoided civilian casualties. He could have demanded anything from the defeated powers, but his words surprised many in the chamber. "The Terran Federation does not seek to rule the galaxy," he said. "We seek to protect it. The new Galactic Defense Force will include ships and personnel from every species that wishes to contribute. Our mission is simple: to make sure that what happened during the Coalition War never happens again." This was the human way. They had fought not for conquest, but for justice. Now they were offering their former enemies a chance to be part of the solution. Dr. Maya Johnson stood to address the Science Council. She had been promoted to Director of Galactic Research, overseeing scientific cooperation between all member species. Her blonde hair was now streaked with gray from the stress of the war years, but her enthusiasm for discovery burned as bright as ever. "The war showed us what we can accomplish when we work together," she said. "Human innovation combined with alien knowledge has already produced breakthrough technologies that will benefit everyone. The new joint research stations will ensure that scientific advancement serves all peoples, not just the powerful." The medical advances alone were revolutionary. Human doctors working with alien scientists had developed treatments for diseases that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. The combination of human adaptability and alien specialized knowledge was proving more powerful than anyone had imagined. Captain Nina Brooks, now Admiral Brooks and commander of the 1st Defense Fleet, outlined the new security arrangements. Her ships patrolled the spaceways, not as conquerors, but as protectors. They stopped pirates, responded to disasters, and made sure that trade routes remained open to all species. "The old system failed because it was based on fear and domination," she explained. "The new system will succeed because it is based on cooperation and mutual protection." But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. The species that had been mocked as primitive and weak was now respected as the guarantor of galactic peace. Human advisors worked with alien governments, helping them rebuild their societies on more just foundations. Commander Ryan Carter had been assigned to work with the Vorthan Collective, helping them transform from a slave-taking empire into a legitimate member of the galactic community. It was not easy work. Centuries of brutal habits were hard to break. But Ryan was patient and determined. Change takes time. he told the Vorthan leaders. But it is possible. We've seen it happen. On dozens of worlds already, the former Vortan slaves were now free citizens with full rights and protections. Many chose to emigrate to human worlds, where they were welcomed as refugees and given opportunities to build new lives. Others stayed to help rebuild their homeworlds, under new leadership. Dr. Ellen Hayes had been appointed to head the new Weapons Control Commission. Her job was to make sure that the galaxy's most dangerous technologies were used only for defense, never for aggression. The quantum torpedoes and other advanced weapons that had won the war were now carefully regulated. Power must be balanced with responsibility, she told the weapons scientists from various species. We have the ability to destroy worlds. We must make sure we never use it wrongly. The commission included representatives from every major species, working together to develop new defensive technologies while limiting the spread of offensive weapons. It was a delicate balance, but one that seemed to be working. On Terra Nova, Colonel Sarah Mitchell had become the world's first elected governor in over 400 years. She walked through the rebuilt cities, seeing human children playing, alongside young aliens whose families had chosen to remain on the world they now considered home. "This is what we fought for," she said to a reporter from the Galactic News Network. "Not victory over our enemies, but a chance for everyone to live in peace." The transformation was visible throughout human space. Worlds that had been isolated for 1,000 years were now bustling centers of trade and culture. The old human colonies that had been liberated during the war were rebuilding with help from both human and alien volunteers. Dr. Sam Collins had established the new Galactic Transportation Network, using his advanced faster-than-light drives to connect distant worlds like never before. Travel that once took weeks now took days. Communication that once took hours now took minutes. "We're making the galaxy smaller," he explained to a gathering of transport officials. "When people can visit each other easily, they're less likely to fear each other." The network was already changing galactic society. Young people from different species were meeting and forming friendships across racial lines. Trade was booming as merchants could move goods quickly and efficiently. Scientists could collaborate in real time regardless of the distances between their laboratories. But perhaps the most significant change was in Earth itself. The small blue planet that had been dismissed as irrelevant was now the beating heart of galactic civilization. Ships from across known space docked at Earth stations. Alien students attended human universities. Human culture was spreading to distant worlds, while Earth itself was enriched by contact with dozens of other civilizations. Admiral Kate Rivers stood in her office, looking out at the busy space lanes around Earth. Ships of every size and design moved through the traffic patterns, their crews working together with an efficiency that would have been impossible before the war. "Hard to believe it's only been 6 months," said Dr. Lisa Wright, who had come to discuss the latest research projects. Kate nodded. The galaxy had changed so quickly that it was sometimes difficult to remember how different things had been. The old system of competing empires and dominated species seemed like ancient history. "The young ones don't remember the old ways," Kate observed. "For them, cooperation is normal. They can't imagine why anyone would want to conquer their neighbors." It was true. A new generation was growing up in a galaxy where humans and aliens worked together as equals. They spoke multiple languages, appreciated different art forms, and saw diversity as a strength rather than a threat. Jake Morrison had written a book about the war, but it wasn't a celebration of human victory. Instead, it was a careful analysis of what had gone wrong in the old system and how the new one could avoid the same mistakes. "The galaxy didn't fear us because we were strong," he wrote in the final chapter. "They feared us because we represented change. We showed them that things didn't have to stay the same, that the weak didn't have to remain weak, and that justice was possible." The book became required reading in military academies across the galaxy. Young officers from dozens of species studied human tactics not to copy them, but to understand the principles behind them. The lessons were about more than winning battles. They were about why battles should be fought at all. As the first year of peace drew to a close, representatives from every species in the galaxy gathered on Earth for the first Galactic Unity Festival. It was a celebration of what they had accomplished together and a promise of what they could achieve in the future. The festival lasted for a week, with displays of art, music, and culture from across known space. Human jazz bands played alongside Zephyrian crystal orchestras. Fourthan poets shared stages with Centauri storytellers. Children from a dozen worlds played games that mixed traditions from all their homelands.